Last summer was supposed to be Russia's big moment. The Kremlin had its eyes set on Pokrovsk, a fortress-like city in eastern Ukraine that serves as a crucial supply and transportation hub. With over 100,000 troops thrown into the fight, Moscow was certain that Ukraine's defenses would collapse under the pressure. If Pokrovsk fell, the rest of Donetsk would supposedly tumble like dominoes. But here we are, months later, and Pokrovsk is still firmly in Ukrainian hands. That's already a huge embarrassment for Russia, but what's happening to its soldiers around Pokrovsk makes the situation even worse. Thousands of Russian troops have ended up trapped in what's being described as a kill zone, a deadly pocket of land where escape is nearly impossible. On September 25th, Euromaidan Press reported that Russian units operating near Pokrovsk had been cut off from their main force. Ukraine managed to pull this off by slicing through a bulge in Russia's front lines, something military analysts call a salient. They used a mix of ground attacks and high-tech drone tactics to close the trap. On the ground, Ukrainian forces kept pushing Russian troops backward, herding them deeper into the pocket. In the skies, swarms of drones turned every possible exit route into a deadly corridor. Any Russian soldier desperate enough to attempt a breakout had to cross these drone-infested zones. Most didn't make it. The trap really began to take shape in the Dobropilya sector, just outside Pokrovsk. Ukrainian forces there launched a series of aggressive moves, tearing apart Russia's front lines and then quickly sealing off the gaps. This forced Russia's soldiers into smaller, scattered groups, making it much harder for them to coordinate or defend themselves effectively. Before long, a massive chunk of Putin's army was stranded, surrounded, and under constant attack from both Ukrainian ground troops and relentless drone strikes. Even President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke about how effective this strategy has been. On September 19th, he highlighted Ukraine's progress in this sector, noting that his forces had managed to recapture about 160 square kilometers of territory. That's roughly 62 square miles, an area bigger than many major cities. He called it a significant success, and it's easy to see why. To understand why Pokrovsk has become such a battlefield centerpiece, you have to picture where it sits on the map. The city isn't just another dot in eastern Ukraine. It's like the beating heart of Donetsk's supply lines. Several major highways and railways run straight through Pokrovsk, connecting frontline positions to bigger cities farther back. Whoever controls this hub controls the flow of fuel, weapons, food, and reinforcements. For Russia, capturing Pokrovsk was supposed to open the door to conquering all of Donetsk. It would have allowed them to resupply their troops more easily and push westward into Ukrainian-held areas. For Ukraine, holding Pokrovsk means keeping that door firmly locked, no matter how many times Moscow tries to kick it open. That's why Putin dedicated such a massive force to this offensive, more than 110,000 troops, enough to fill a huge sports stadium more than twice over. The plan was simple on paper: overwhelm Ukrainian defenses with sheer numbers and grind them down until the city fell. But wars aren't fought on paper. Ukraine had other ideas. Instead of meeting Russia head-on with equal numbers, Ukrainian commanders leaned on agility, clever planning, and technology. Drones, in particular, have become game-changers in this war. Some drones are tiny, buzzing just overhead like hornets, spotting Russian troop movements and guiding artillery fire. Others are larger and deadlier, carrying explosives that can wipe out tanks or shred convoys. And the best part for Ukraine? They're cheap compared to the expensive equipment Russia keeps losing. In the Dobropilya sector, this strategy really came to life. Ukrainian troops moved quickly, punching holes in Russia's lines and then sealing them shut before reinforcements could pour in. Every time Russian soldiers tried to regroup, Ukrainian drones were waiting, circling above like hunters. It wasn't long before Russian units found themselves surrounded, cut off from supplies, and forced into a shrinking pocket. What soldiers grimly call a cauldron. Imagine being inside that cauldron. Food and ammunition are running out. Communication with commanders is shaky at best. Every road out is under Ukrainian watch, and the skies above are alive with drones that can strike at any moment. Trying to escape feels less like a retreat and more like walking into an ambush. That's the nightmare thousands of Russian soldiers are facing near Pokrovsk right now. Meanwhile, Ukraine has been racking up territorial gains. The Guardian recently reported that in just this one area near Dobropilya, Ukrainian forces clawed back about 160 square kilometers. That's larger than the entire city of Washington. D.C. President Zelensky himself called it an important victory not just for the land retaken but for the morale boost it gives his soldiers and citizens. Every kilometer regained is proof that Russia's massive offensives aren't unstoppable after all. True to form, Moscow has stayed silent about what's happening in Dobropilya. Whenever Russian forces hit setbacks on the battlefield, the Kremlin usually follows the same script: deny, deflect, or say nothing at all. Admitting to failure, especially one this large, would shatter the image of strength that Putin tries to project. But silence doesn't change the reality on the ground, and that reality is grim. Russia's summer offensive has stalled, and what little ground it managed to seize is now slipping away piece by piece. For the Russian troops trapped in Dobropilya, time is running out. They've been cut off, surrounded, and slowly pushed into smaller and smaller pockets. Euromaidan Press describes their situation as hopeless, with escape routes closing faster each day. But Dobropilya isn't the only front where Russia is in trouble. Just a short distance away lies Pankivka, a small village in the Dobropilya sector. On paper, Pankivka might look insignificant, but in wars like this, small villages often decide the fate of much larger battles. Russia had been trying to hold on to Pankivka as part of its broader push toward Pokrovsk, but Ukrainian forces came in hard and fast. According to reports, Putin's troops couldn't keep up with the southward Ukrainian advance, and within days, the village was back under Ukrainian control. On September 15th, the Kyiv Independent confirmed the news. Pankivka was liberated. The push was led in large part by Ukraine's Azov Corps, a battle-hardened unit that has been active in the Pokrovsk region since mid-August. These fighters played a crucial role in severing a Russian salient, that protruding wedge of territory Russia had been trying to use to break into Pokrovsk from multiple directions. By cutting it off, the Azov Corps not only stopped the Russian advance but also opened the door for Ukraine to retake nearby settlements like Pankivka. Pokrovsk itself remains contested, but it's still firmly under Ukrainian control. And instead of waiting for Russia's next move, Ukrainian commanders have flipped the script. From Pokrovsk, the Azov Corps and other units are launching counteroffensives outward, clawing back the smaller villages and settlements that Russia once tried to use as stepping stones. Each liberation doesn't just push the front line back, it makes Russia's broader strategy of surrounding Pokrovsk weaker and weaker. In a Facebook post celebrating the liberation of Pankivka, the Azov Corps wrote that Ukraine's defense forces were continuing to advance in the Dobropilya direction, steadily freeing more territory. For the soldiers on the ground, this wasn't just a symbolic win. It was proof that Russia's summer gamble to storm Pokrovsk had failed, and that Ukraine was now the one dictating the pace of the fight. Russia's silence on Dobropilya and Pankivka isn't an accident. It's a calculated part of the Kremlin's information strategy. At home, Putin relies on a carefully controlled media environment where defeats are either spun as tactical withdrawals or ignored entirely. The less ordinary Russians hear about losses, the easier it is to keep them believing that their army is marching toward inevitable victory. To admit that thousands of Russian soldiers are trapped or that entire villages have been lost would undermine that illusion. Instead, Russian state media tends to focus on stories of heroic soldiers, exaggerated Ukrainian casualties, or narratives about fighting NATO rather than Ukraine itself. This way, the Kremlin can claim it's not losing to a smaller neighbor but instead holding off the combined might of the West. But cracks in that narrative keep appearing, especially as reports trickle out on social media from soldiers' families or captured footage from the front lines. Silence may buy Putin time, but it doesn't erase the truth. Russia's summer offensive has failed. On the flip side, Ukraine has taken the opposite approach. Each battlefield success, no matter how small, is broadcast widely, both to its own citizens and to international audiences. Liberating Pankivka might not seem as dramatic as retaking a major city, but it carries symbolic weight. For Ukrainians living under the constant strain of war, hearing that another village has been freed offers hope and proof that their army is still advancing despite the odds. It's a morale booster at home, where resilience is just as important as military hardware. Internationally, these victories are just as valuable. Every square kilometer reclaimed is evidence Ukraine can use when appealing to allies for more weapons, more funding, and more political backing. Governments in Europe and North America are more likely to approve expensive aid packages if they can point to clear progress on the battlefield. When Zelensky stands before foreign parliaments or meets with world leaders, victories like Dobropilia and Pankivka allow him to say, "We're not just holding the line, we're winning ground. Your support is working." This dynamic has become a pattern of the war. Russia tries to downplay or hide its setbacks, while Ukraine spotlights each success to rally both its citizens and its partners abroad. In many ways, the information war runs parallel to the one on the ground. What happens in a small village like Pankivka might shape not only local battle lines, but also the headlines in Washington, Brussels, or Berlin. After Ukrainian forces cleared Pankivka and the surrounding areas, Russia tried to claw it back, but the counterattack barely got off the ground. Euromaidan press reports that Moscow could only throw together 4 infantry units and a single Marine regiment for the job, a far cry from the overwhelming force Russia once hoped to bring to this region. Even then, most of those soldiers never reached the village. Ukraine's defenders were waiting. Instead of sitting back, they hit Russia's reinforcements before they arrived, using quick, targeted strikes to break up the advance. One attempt captured on video tells the story in painful detail. According to RFU News, a group of just 10 Russian soldiers was sent in the direction of Pankivka, probably as part of the larger counteroffensive. They never made it. As the group moved across open ground, Ukraine unleashed the same kind of drone swarm that has been tormenting Russian troops in the Dobropilia cauldron. The sky filled with buzzing machines, each one carrying explosives. What followed was brutal. The drones struck so fast and with such precision that 9 of the 10 Russians were killed almost instantly. Only one soldier lived long enough to throw down his weapon and surrender. For Ukraine, this was another success. For Russia, it was a grim example of how even small counterattacks are now ending in disaster. And that wasn't the only failed attempt. In more footage shared by RFU News, viewers can see what happened when Russia tried something different, sending in motorcycle assault groups. Believe it or not, motorcycles have become a kind of new tactic for Russia. As Business Insider reported earlier this year, Moscow started using motorcycles for smaller assaults after losing too many tanks and armored vehicles to Ukrainian drones in late 2023 and early 2024. The idea was that motorcycles, being smaller and faster, might slip past drone strikes in ways that bulky armored vehicles could not. But in practice, that theory fell apart quickly. The motorcycle-mounted troops heading toward Pankivka were just as vulnerable, maybe even more so. They had no heavy armor, no real cover, and no way to hide from watchful drones circling above. When the swarm descended, the riders were exposed in the open, and they were cut down almost as quickly as the unlucky group of 10 infantrymen. What was supposed to be a clever adaptation to drones ended up looking more like a suicide mission. Russia's struggles here show more than just tactical failures. They reveal how badly stretched and demoralized its forces have become in the Pokrovsk sector. Once reliant on tanks and armored vehicles to spearhead offensives, Russia is now resorting to motorbikes and piecemeal units, only to watch them get destroyed before they can even reach the fight. The Russian motorcycle unit that tried to reach Pankivka never even got close. According to Euromaidan press, Ukrainian forces intercepted and destroyed the group long before they could help the soldiers trapped in the Dobropilia cauldron. That detail is important, because it shows how carefully Ukraine has designed this operation. The cauldron isn't just a trap where Russian soldiers sit surrounded, cut off, and hoping Ukraine eventually leaves. It's also a fortress within a fortress. Ukrainian units didn't just seal the cauldron, they built layers of defense around it. They knew Russia would send reinforcements and supplies to try to break the encirclement, and they made sure those rescue attempts would fail before they even reached the front line. And so far, that's exactly what's happening. Every counterattack Russia has launched, whether it's infantry squads, motorcycle groups, or supply convoys, has been spotted, tracked, and eliminated almost immediately.
If you've made it this far into the video, it means you're enjoying what we do here at Euro Bulletin. Take a second to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more updates and insights from Europe and its partners. Let's dive in more into the subject.
Another example came when Russia tried to sneak in a supply van loaded with ammunition, weapons, and other gear. Instead of making it to the trapped soldiers, the van went up in flames after a Ukrainian strike hit it directly. The explosion didn't just kill the men inside, it also wiped out badly needed supplies. For the Russian troops inside the cauldron, that meant one less lifeline, one more day without food, bullets, or hope. All of this ties into the larger point. Russia keeps throwing bodies and equipment into the fight, but Ukraine is winning with brains, not just brawn. Putin doesn't seem to care how many of his soldiers are sacrificed so long as Ukrainian defenses eventually collapse. But what the Azov Corps has done is flip that dynamic. By creating order out of what was once chaos, they've turned Pokrovsk and Dobropilya into test cases for a new kind of warfare. One where information, speed, and precision matter more than raw numbers. One Azov commander, Lemko, described what the battlefield looked like before his unit arrived. There was total chaos, he explained. Soldiers didn't even know where their own positions were, let alone where the enemy was. There were no layered defenses, no organized strategy, just scattered groups trying to hold the line. In their first week, Azov fighters collected every scrap of intelligence they could, mapping Russian positions and identifying weak points. Once they had that picture, they moved swiftly, cutting Russian groups off here, isolating them there, and slowly squeezing the enemy into kill zones. It was tactics versus manpower. And in Dobropilya, tactics are clearly winning. Dobropilya is more than just a battlefield story. It's a snapshot of how the entire war is being fought. Russia has the advantage in sheer numbers. It has a bigger population, more men it can draft, and massive stockpiles of old Soviet-era tanks, artillery pieces, and rockets. On paper, that kind of advantage should overwhelm a smaller country like Ukraine. But wars aren't fought on paper. Ukraine has figured out that the way to beat a larger army isn't to match it soldier for soldier or tank for tank, but to outthink it. That's exactly what we're seeing in Dobropilya. Instead of wasting men in direct clashes, Ukraine is cutting Russian forces into smaller pieces, starving them of supplies, and then using drones and artillery to pick them off with minimal risk to its own troops. This approach matters because Russia has shown time and again that it's willing to treat its soldiers as expendable. Human lives are fuel for Putin's war machine. If one wave of troops is destroyed, he sends another, and then another. That's why Russia has been able to keep its offensives going despite staggering losses. But Ukraine knows it can't play that same game. It doesn't have endless reserves of manpower, so it has to make every strike count. Technology has become Ukraine's equalizer. Drones in particular have changed the math of the war. A swarm of quadcopters that costs a few $1,000s can destroy a tank worth millions. Cheap surveillance drones can guide artillery fire so precisely that entire Russian convoys are wiped out before they even see the enemy. It's a classic case of David using a sling against Goliath, except in this case, the sling is packed with explosives and guided by real-time intelligence. The contrast couldn't be clearer in places like Pankivka. Russia tried to adapt by sending soldiers on motorcycles, hoping they'd slip past drones where tanks had failed. Instead, the drones shredded them just as easily. That shows the problem Russia faces. Its adaptations are reactive, desperate, and often too late. Ukraine, meanwhile, is shaping the battlefield by dictating how and where the fighting happens. Strategically, this has ripple effects far beyond Dobropilya. Every time Ukraine proves it can outmaneuver Russia, it boosts confidence among its allies. Western governments see that their weapons and funding aren't disappearing into a black hole. They're fueling real results. That makes it easier for Ukraine to keep the flow of international support going, which is critical for the long haul. On the Russian side, these failures sap morale. Soldiers stuck in the Dobropilya cauldron, cut off from supplies and watching failed rescue attempts get destroyed one after another, can't help but see the futility. Even families back home, despite the Kremlin's best efforts to hide the truth, eventually hear about the mounting casualties. Propaganda only stretches so far when the body bags keep piling up. In short, Russia is relying on brute manpower. Ukraine is relying on tactical innovation. And in battles like Dobropilia, the smarter, smaller force is proving it can outfight the larger one. So now the world is watching Dobropilia and Pokrovsk like a live chess match. Ukraine has the upper hand in tactics and technology, carving up Russian forces piece by piece. Russia, despite its massive manpower reserves, keeps bleeding soldiers and equipment for very little gain. But the war is far from over. Will Moscow double down and pour even more men into this cauldron, knowing many of them may never return? Or will the Kremlin quietly shift its attention elsewhere, pretending Dobropilia was never part of the plan? Can Ukraine keep up this pace of drone warfare? Or will Russia find a countermeasure that finally blunts the edge of Ukraine's aerial advantage? And beyond the battlefield, how will these fights ripple across the globe? Will Ukraine's steady gains convince its allies to send even more aid, or will Western support start to waver as the war drags on? Inside Russia, how long can silence and propaganda hold back the truth when families are demanding answers about lost sons and fathers? For now, Pokrovsk stands. Dobropilia is a trap, and Russia's soldiers are running out of options. But wars twist and turn, and what feels like a breakthrough today could shift tomorrow. The real question is, in the coming days and months, who will adapt faster? The army with more numbers or the one with smarter tactics?